Welcome to the Deep Dive. It's Monday, May 5th, 2025, and we're here to really cut through the noise of today's global news.
That's right. The goal is simple. Pull out the key knowledge, the insights that actually matter for understanding, the bigger picture.
Exactly, giving you that clear perspective on what's shaping things.
And it's a busy day. Lots of interconnected events unfolding.
It really is. We've got, well, quite a range. Escalating tensions in the South China Sea, for one.
Mm.
Then there's the U.S. AI legislation moving fast, India's lunar mission updates,
Uh-huh.
European wildfires, the Meta versus OpenAI race heating up,
That's a big one.
the oil price drop linked to green energy, plus Beyoncé's tour impact, and a Netflix streaming record, just to round it out.
Quite the mix. So where do we start?
Let's dive straight into global affairs. Seems like the logical place.
Agreed. And the South China Sea really jumps out immediately. We're seeing satellite images confirming more military activity. China, Vietnam, the Philippines.
Right, near the Spratly Islands, it's definitely a noticeable uptick.
And it's not just ships moving around. There are reports of specific Chinese naval deployments.
And that's happening alongside these joint U.S.-Philippine military drills, it feels like. Well, competing interests are becoming much more visible.
It really underscores that delicate power balance. And you have to remember the background here, the 2016 Hague Tribunal ruling.
The one that rejected China's big territorial claims.
Exactly, and China just, well, dismissed it. That tells you a lot about their strategic thinking, regardless of international law.
It does.
Yeah.
And the U.S. is clearly watching. The Department of Defense is repositioning a carrier strike group in the Western Pacific.
Which signals concern, definitely. Though analysts aren't expecting immediate conflict, it's a clear sign they're taking it seriously.
And it's not just the U.S. and China anymore, is it? Japan and Australia are voicing support for the Philippines.
That's a key point. It broadens the whole dispute, makes it more complex, more geopolitical.
We got some analysis from Anika Ramesh in Jakarta, who flagged this as a potential flashpoint, maybe?
Yeah.
Especially between the U.S. and China.
Right, and she linked it to Taiwan, too. The new president there, Lin Yuchen, he's been pushing for more independence.
And Beijing has responded.
Oh, yeah. Increased Chinese military flights near Taiwan, these combat readiness patrols.
Right.
It's all happened since Lin's inauguration. It feels like a pattern.
So the South China Sea activity, the Taiwan pressure,
Yeah,
it all seems connected.
very much so. Assertive signaling from China. And reports say tensions are the highest they've been since, what, 2022?
Wow. Okay, shifting gears slightly.
Mm.
The Middle East, always complex,
Always.
but there are fresh peace talks
Mm.
between Israeli and Palestinian leaders in Doha.
Yes, backed by the EU this time, which, always offers a glimmer of hope when dialogue restarts.
But the same old obstacles remain.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Leibowitz says he's willing to listen.
But the settlement expansions are continuing, and that's a massive roadblock, always has been.
And from the Hamas side,
They're signaling maybe openness to a long-term ceasefire, but, and this is crucial, only if reliable humanitarian corridors are set up and the airstrikes stop.
big preconditions. Understandable ones, but still significant hurdles.
Absolutely. So yes, Qatar and the EU involvement brings cautious optimism, but the core issues, security, land, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, they haven't gone away. Real progress needs major concessions.
Okay, let's move to Eastern Europe. Ukraine. The war is entering its fourth year now.
A grim milestone. And intelligence leaks are suggesting a possible Russian summer offensive in the Donbass.
That's deeply worrying after all this time.
It is. A renewed push there would mean, well, more destruction, more suffering. But Ukraine is still determined. President Zelensky just secured another $6 billion in NATO aid.
What kind of aid?
Long-range artillery, advanced drone systems, serious hardware. It shows their resolve hasn't faded.
Still, you hear calls in Europe, Macron, Schultz, for a diplomatic solution.
You do, and that sentiment might be growing, but honestly, neither side seems ready to back down right now. A diplomatic breakthrough feels distant.
Zelensky's quote was powerful. We will not stop defending our land. Every bullet we receive is a shield for our people.
It really captures that spirit. But then you contrast it with Putin's Victory Day speech made early, notably.
What was the tone there?
Accusatory, blaming the West for provocation, calling Ukraine's leaders a NATO puppet regime. Standard rhetoric, but amplified, especially in Russian state media, likely due to the tighter sanctions.
So entrenched positions on both sides. Okay, let's look at Africa. Sudan. The humanitarian situation sounds dire.
It's catastrophic. Fighting between the government forces and the rapid support forces, it's displaced over 1 million people.
1 million in just the last 2 months.
Yes. The speed and scale are staggering. And the UN is warning about potential famine if aid doesn't get through within weeks.
But getting aid through is the problem.
A huge problem. UN convoys are struggling to reach affected areas. Both sides are blaming each other for attacks on humanitarian workers. It's incredibly dangerous.
The African Union called for a ceasefire during Ramadan. Any luck?
Some diplomatic effort, but progress seems very slow. And Ahmed Kohn's analysis from Nairobi highlights the spillover effect.
The refugee crisis.
Exactly. It's putting immense pressure on neighboring South Sudan and Ethiopia, adds another layer of instability.
What was that about AI drones in Sudan?
Oh, right. That's interesting. Some private tech companies are apparently using AI-powered drones to identify food shortages and even make relief drops.
Right.
Yeah, shows the potential for tech in crises, but also raises big questions about, oversight and control in a war zone.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, rounding out global affairs, Latin America, Brazil first. Big protests.
Massive ones. São Paulo, Rio, against President Lula's new economic reforms.
What are the reforms?
Things like pension cuts, hikes in fuel taxes, unpopular measures, clearly. There have been clashes with police, hundreds arrested.
Has President Lula responded?
Addressed the nation, called for calm, promised dialogue. But the unions are threatening a nationwide strike, so this might not be over.
And Argentina. Still battling inflation.
Afraid so. Back in double digits. President Rivera is back negotiating with the IMF to try and stabilize things.
A familiar story for Argentina, unfortunately.
Yes, it is. But there's also this interesting deal Rivera signed with India's Infosys
For what?
to develop nationwide AI-driven education platforms. It's ambitious, sparking hope, but also criticism.
Criticism about what? Access? Data?
Both. Plus the broader questions about relying so heavily on AI for something like national education. What are the long-term effects? It's a big gamble.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground globally. Let's shift focus now to the U.S. and the wider Americas.
Makes sense. A lot happening there, too, especially around technology and its governance.
Top of the list seems to be this AI legislation in the U.S., the National AI Accountability and Ethics Act. It's being fast-tracked.
Apparently so. There seems to be growing bipartisan agreement, at least in the Senate Judiciary Committee, that something needs to be done about AI oversight.
What are the key bits of the proposed law?
Well, things like mandatory transparency audits for AI systems, algorithmic fairness benchmarks, basically trying to stop AI from being biased,
Okay.
and also licensing requirements for the really big AI models, like large language models, and for autonomous systems.
So trying to get ahead of the risks, Senator Ortiz's quote seemed to capture that balance, right? Innovation versus safety and rights.
Exactly. How do you foster progress without compromising core values? That's the central tension.
And the tech companies lobbying hard, I
A
assume.
little bit. OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Meta. They're arguing that rigid rules could stifle innovation, hurt U.S. competitiveness globally, which, isn't an entirely unfair point in a global race.
There was something about OpenAI pushing for a regulatory sandbox. Saw that in those leaked TechWatch Weekly memos.
Right. That suggests they want a more flexible approach, a space to test things out under supervision maybe, rather than hard and fast rules from the get-go.
Is that common? The sandbox idea.
It comes up a lot with new tech. The argument is it allows innovation in a controlled way, but critics worry about things going wrong even in a limited test.
Okay, another big U.S. item,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court. They're hearing a case called United States v. Pierce.
Yes, and this could be huge for digital privacy. It's about AI surveillance and the Fourth Amendment.
The Fourth Amendment. That's the one about unreasonable searches.
Precisely. The question is, can police use predictive AI analytics on public camera footage without getting a warrant first?
Wow. Okay, that's fundamental. What are the arguments?
Privacy groups like the ACLU are deeply concerned. They see a massive expansion of surveillance potential and worry it could worsen over-policing and racial profiling, given known issues with AI bias.
And the government's view, the DOJ.
Their line is basically that AI is just another tool, like a patrol car or binoculars, just a more efficient way to analyze information already in the public view.
So a clash between privacy rights and law enforcement tools. When do we expect a decision?
Oral arguments are expected next week, I think. A decision probably by late June. It's definitely one to watch closely.
Absolutely. Now, staying in the U.S., we're also seeing a wave of student protests on campuses nationwide.
Yeah, it seems quite widespread, covering a range of issues too: global conflicts, tuition hikes, even censorship concerns.
Any specific examples mentioned?
Columbia University had a sit-in over university contracts with tech firms linked to the military. At UC Berkeley, students blocked lecture halls demanding divestment from fossil fuels and, interestingly, more equitable AI education.
So connecting local university policies to bigger global issues.
Exactly. But there's tension, too. At the University of Texas, things escalated with police clashes, arrests.
How many arrests?
Reports said 47. And now there's debate over whether that was just enforcing safety rules or, criminalizing dissent.
There was a quote from an anonymous student organizer.
Right, talking about protesting a system that profits from conflict and climate collapse while silencing young voices, captures the feeling behind it.
Have the universities responded formally?
Some presidents issued joint statements, promising audits of investment portfolios, developing new protest guidelines, that sort of thing.
But the students feel it's not enough.
Seems that way. The feeling is these are maybe steps, but not addressing the core demands.
Okay, let's shift to U.S. politics. The 2026 midterms are already on the radar. Seems early.
Never too early in U.S. politics. But yes, early maneuvering is happening. President Harris has a fairly decent approval rating right now, around 58%.
So she's likely to be actively supporting candidates.
Expected to back progressive candidates, yes. Though her big policy wins, green infrastructure, childcare, AI education are described as having mixed success. Implementation is always tricky.
Is the economy helping or hurting her?
The slow rebound is probably helping public confidence a bit, giving Democrats some breathing room.
And the Republicans?
Yeah.
What's their strategy after the 2024 losses?
Still regrouping, it seems. But one name emerging is Governor Michael Latham of Florida.
What's his angle?
Pushing a more libertarian agenda, focusing on things like digital freedom. He's seen as a rising star, and there are already whispers about a 2028 presidential run.
Interesting. Okay, let's look south to Mexico, entering a key election cycle.
Very much so. President Andres Martinez is term limited, so it's wide open. And the big themes seem to be AI and security. It's being called the AI and security election.
But violence is still a major issue in Mexican elections.
Sadly, yes. A mayoral candidate was assassinated recently in Michoacan, allegedly cartel-linked actors. Security forces are heavily deployed because of these risks.
And the AI angle, how are the candidates positioning themselves?
Big policy divisions. The frontrunner, Claudia Torres from the Social Unity Party, has this bold plan. She wants to digitize government services using Indian AI tech and build a national AI public safety grid.
An AI public safety grid. That sounds potentially controversial.
It is. It's being heavily criticized for potential mass surveillance implications. Using AI on that scale for security raises huge privacy flags.
Who's her main rival?
Conservative candidate Alejandra Vega. The latest polls have Torres around 42%, Vega at 34%. So she has a lead, but this AI debate is central. Elections mid-June.
Right. Moving north now, Canada. Big green energy push.
Huge. Prime Minister Jasmine Chen launched a $50 billion initiative. The goal is ambitious. Convert fossil fuel infrastructure to hydrogen and smart grids by 2030.
$50 billion is serious investment.
It signals a major commitment. But there's another angle. Tech talent. They're also doubling immigration targets for STEM workers.
Why? A shortage.
Apparently, yes. Vancouver and Toronto are seeing their tech workforces shrink, partly due to high living costs, so they need to attract talent to fuel these green tech ambitions, among other things.
They're also experimenting with AI for urban planning.
Yeah, using AI to generate proposals for housing, transportation, trying to improve efficiency. PM Chen framed it all together: climate justice, innovation, equity, designing future cities.
Comprehensive vision. Okay, lastly for this section, South America. What's happening in Venezuela and Colombia?
Interesting shifts. In Venezuela, the new president Nicolas Barreto, who won in a surprise upset, is actually pushing for economic liberalization, opening up lithium reserves to foreign investors, for example.
That's a change. And Colombia. Peace talks.
A major breakthrough, potentially, between the government and the ELN rebel group. They've agreed on a framework for disarmament and reintegration with UN peacekeepers involved. That's significant for stability. Definitely positive news. And then there's this regional AI pact.
Yes. This is quite novel. Brazil, Colombia, and Chile signed what's being called the world's first regional AI coordination pact.
What's the goal?
To coordinate on AI ethics, the impact on labor, data sovereignty, basically trying to carve out their own approach, distinct from the U.S.-China dominance in AI. It's about setting regional standards and asserting some control.
That's fascinating. A collective regional response to a global tech wave.
Exactly. a really noteworthy development in how nations are trying to manage AI's rise.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, wow, a lot has happened just today. Several big themes are really standing out.
Definitely, you've got these persistent geopolitical tensions, whether it's the South China Sea or Ukraine, ongoing conflicts driving humanitarian crises like in Sudan.
And then this layer of technology woven through everything. The AI legislation, the surveillance debates, even the potential use in aid delivery.
Right, and the regulation struggles that come with it. Plus, we saw social and political unrest linked to economic policies in Brazil, student activism in the U.S., and these constant environmental challenges, like the wildfires in Europe mentioned earlier, or Canada's green energy push.
And what strikes me is how interconnected it all is. You mentioned the AI drones in Sudan, that intersection of advanced tech and desperate humanitarian need.
Or that South American AI packed a geopolitical response driven entirely by technological advancement.
Precisely.
It really leaves you thinking, reflecting on everything we've covered today. What are the longer-term implications as AI gets more embedded, not just in tools, but in governance? Maybe even in conflict itself. When AI systems potentially start influencing or even making critical decisions in infrastructure security, what new kinds of risks or ethical dilemmas does that bring up on a global scale?
That is absolutely the crucial question, isn't it? Something that demands a lot more thought and probably a lot more international discussion as we move forward.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the day's events. We'll keep tracking these stories and bring you the insights that matter.